Yeah, so today we'll start looking into the transformations. If you have any questions on the previous topics, please let me know. Uh, if not, we'll continue with today's topics. Any questions on single user instance and multi-user instance, system configurations, data store configurations? All right. So even later stages, if you have any questions on them, please let me know. Uh, Right, let us start looking into the transformations. So these transformations are divided into three major categories. One is platform transformation, second one is integrated transformation, and the third one is quality transformation. So the platform transformation forms the basic heart of these data services transformations. The name itself will tell you that they are the most important transformations that you will be working with. So ideally, if you know these transformations in and out, you can start working on any data migration project, and you can do any number of business rules or any kind of an activity using these platform transformations. So let's get into the system. I think I'm in long repository here. Can you please tell me the repository that we are in? Is this the one, LR1? Yeah, I guess yes. Yeah, so let's continue with the platform transformations. So if you look at these transformations here in the local object library, the transforms tab. So these platform transformations, so there are a few additions to the latest version. XML map was not there in the previous versions. It's a new addition. So these platform transformations, if you know them, if you know them in and out, you can start working on any data migration project. Right. So let us know complete details of these platform transformations. Let us start with case. So if you look at the case, so some definitions here are good and some of them are not that proper. So I'll try to give you a proper definition for them as well. So if you look at the case transformation, it says defines the processing of different rows in different manner, or you can in a simple way, you can say that it splits a single data set into multiple data sets based on a condition. Splits a single data set into multiple data sets based on a condition. So, which means we have a larger data set. So, complete data, and if you want to split them into 4 quarters, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. So you split the data based on a condition where each condition satisfies 1 quarter, right? So you have an yearly data. So you have a yearly information and you want to split that into 4 quarters, and this is what a case transformation can do. It splits a single data set into multiple data sets based on a condition that you specify. So let's go and do that on the system. So create a job, select the project folder, right click and do a job. So job underscore case, and create a data flow, df underscore case. Then within the data flow, go to the data store tab, expand your source tables, pull in the orders and make it as your source. Now let's have a look at the data based on which we will decide what are the different criteria that will be the data is split into. So if you look at this, it has some data like ship via 1, 2, 3. So the maximum versions that we see in this ship via is 1, 2, and 3. So there are, let me check if there is 4. Alright, no data. So it has only three routes via which these goods are shipped. So ship via 1, via 2, and via 3. Now let me use a case transformation to split this single data set, the orders data set, into multiple data sets like orders via 1, orders via 2, and orders via 3 using a case statement. Alright, sometimes you might have a global information present in your system, and you want to apply a country specific taxation codes on the data, right? So let us say in my current recent project, right, so that I have done, so the employee information is present in different geographical locations. From different geographical locations we have the employee information, and on this information, right, we have to apply a country local taxation code on each and every salary, right? So sorry, all right. I think Sandeep just came. Welcome, Sandeep. So we have to split that data into country wise. So or taxation on that data, and then again we have to club them into a single data set. So now let us go and look at the case. So connect orders to the case transformation, and if you open the case transformation, now it is divided into two regions. One is your schema, which talks about your source structure, and the second one is your case tab, which talks about the work area for case transformation. Now we have few check boxes here, right? First one, produce default output label with you can give any default tag here. So I want to apply conditions here for 1 and 2, and all the remaining I will take them as via 3, or you can use the tag called as default or others. You can give any name. So whatever the data that satisfies the conditions will go with their specific label, and if anything is left, it will go with the label last one. So that is produce default output with this label. The second checkbox here is row can be true for only one case. So if you are validating a row, right, so you are applying a case transformation on two different columns, right, it can be true only for one, because if it is true for one and false for other, it cannot be present as a valid record in two tables. So I think you got my point. So I'm trying to do validation here and also a validation here on these two columns, and it can be true only for one thing. So just in case if it is false, I don't want the bad data to be present in the good data. So you can check this box to make sure you don't have, and preserve the expression order, the order in which you create these expressions. You want to preserve them, you can keep them. Next, you can right click here and say add expressions. In this gray area, you can right click and say add expressions, or you can go and click on this add button and it will say label, call it as via1, and it will throw a red symbol here, a warning symbol saying that the expression is not correct. So select the column here from the schema and drag and drop that into the casework area and give the value here. Right, again click back here. So now it is good because we gave the condition properly. So label is via1, add via2, and do this, repeat the same process. Select the column from schema, drag and drop it into the work area and type 2. Then click back on the label. Now we have two labels, via1 and via2. So what are the data? I'm just using it like a where condition. Where or ship via is equal to 1, it should go into this label. Where ship via is equal to 2, it should go into the table, this label. And all the remaining default records can go into this one. Right, just go back. Now create tables called orders via1 and select the target data store. Click on OK. Connect it. Now the moment you connect it, you'll see all the three labels that we created here in the case transformation. So via1, then orders via2, the second table, orders via3. So connect from case to target tables and select the specific label to their tables. Right, now your case transformation job is done. Just go and validate to see if there are any errors in this one. Validate all, no errors found. So now if you look at the metadata set, so you need to understand what happens on the back end as well. Now if you look at the metadata set of the orders table, all the other tables, right, all the target tables that are created, they will also have the same metadata set, right, the same table structure, the data types and their columns. So here we are not trying to do any changes on the metadata, but we're just trying to split the data into three different buckets based on condition. Now let's go and validate the job, execute the job. And the job is started. Now the data flow is started and it's completed successfully. So you can also look at that from here. So ship via1, it picked 249 records. Ship via2, it picked 326 records, and ship via3, it picked 255 records, and the duration for that is 0.03 seconds. So nothing is greater than a second in the entire job, which handle almost around 830 records. It's completed in 3.47 seconds, right? So let's go and look at the data as well. Now if you click on this magnifying glass via1, so you have the ship via column here, which almost picked 249 records. And if you want to cross check this one, so apply the filter condition on that column by, I think I spoke about it. If not, you click on a cell here, right click and say add to filter, and you can apply the conditions here and just click on apply and OK. Now you don't see any other data because the entire data is only with ship via1. So you can cross check these outputs, right? So even in future, if you are applying some business rules on the data, you can just go and apply these kind of filters and to cross check if the data is proper or not. Right, so shipware 3, all the default records are coming here. So if I'm checking if anything is not equal to 3, then no, we don't have any data that is not equal to 3. Now this is how I split my data using a case transformation. Now let us see the merge transformation, which is exactly opposite to case. Now if you look at the case pictorial representation here, it says a single data set into multiple data set based on a condition. Now if you look at this, multiple data sets combined into a single data set. So initial days when I started learning data services, this was one of my favorite transformation because I'll just show you why it was my favorite transformation, because for each and everything I started practicing with, even like case, map operation, whatever it is, a query transform, I got a number of errors, and this transformation did not throw any errors for the first time when I did this. So that was my favorite reason why it was my favorite. And also, as I told you, the bug that was used in that used to be there in data services 3.0 version. So if you are using any transformation, right, so you just need to use a merge in between that to avoid the syntax errors. So that was a bug in 3.0. So if you just validate and if it throws some syntax errors, you just need to delete this connection. Just simply use it. Don't do anything within that one. Just you need to pull it here, connect it with your case, and from there to your target. Now that solves a syntax error in 3.0. That was resolved from the version 3.2. That's the major bug in 3.0. Now let us look at the merge transformation. So merge transformation is exactly opposite to case transformation. It says combines incoming data sets producing a single output data set with the same schema as the input data set. So now the main condition that should be there for the merge transformation is all the source data sets that you use, right? All the source tables that you use should be the same as your, all of them should be the same. The metadata should be the same. Then only you can use a merge transformation. So let me go and build a job here. Job underscore merge. Create a data flow, df underscore merge. Now I'll use this tables here because the tables that we just created as a part of the case transformation, all these tables have the same metadata, right? Because we split a single table into multiple data sets, so I have the same metadata present in all these three tables. And one more quick thumb rule, the target tables in prior transformation will become the source tables in the next data flow. So I'm dragging all these three tables, and these three tables via 1, 2, and 3 has the same metadata. Now go to the transforms tab, pick the merge transformation, drag and drop that into the data flow, and give them name all, merge underscore all. Alright, as per the diagram, it combines multiple data sets into a single data set, and the only condition that it has is that all the source tables should have the same metadata. Right, all the source tables should have the similar structure. So create a target table, order stage, and okay, it's already available. Stage orders, I'm just trying to give a different name here. Just click on OK and connect it with your merge transformation. Now the next step is click on merge transformation, open and see, and this is the reason why it was my favorite transformation. There's nothing that you need to do here, right? So no errors, nothing. You just drag and drop a transformation, and the only condition you need to maintain is all your sources should have the same metadata. All your source table structures should remain the same. So now you might have a question like, in general world, in real projects, you need to merge multiple tables, and definitely for sure the metadata of all the tables will never be the same. So how can you do that using a merge transformation, if that is a generic question or a genuine question? So to answer that, I'll repeat the question if somebody missed. In real time, if I have tables flowing in from 3 different sources and you need to merge them using merge transformation, they'll definitely not have the same metadata. Then how can I handle this? So that's the question. So to handle that, you can use a query transformation in between. You can select one particular metadata structure which is standard, and you can convert all the remaining sources to that structure. So let us say ship wire 1 is my standard, and these remaining columns, all the remaining sources have different metadata, different structure. Now you want to convert that metadata to one common structure. You need to make sure that one of your sources is standard. So use a query transformation in between. Now you call the columns from schema in to schema out, or so let us say wire 1 has only 4 columns, so you pull in only 4 columns to this one. So not all the sources will have the same number of columns, right? So source 1 can have 5 columns, source 2 can have 10 columns, and source 3 can have 15 columns, but the common columns will be only 5. So you need to pull in only those particular columns, right? In our case, we have everything. I'm just giving you examples. So say map to output, and let us say order ID is ORDR underscore ID in wire 1 table. So you can just double click on the column here, change the name and click on OK, and the column name will be changed, right? You just need to double click and give the column name. You can also change the data type and their lengths, right? So you can do those modifications, and you connect it back to the merge transformation. Now you need to make the only thing that you need to follow here, just in case if you have different metadata sets to be merged, is you need to make one table source as a standard, and you need to convert all the remaining sources based on that. So that's how we do a conversion on the metadata, and we will merge all the data sets together. Now validate this if this has any errors. No. Right click and execute the job, and once the job execution is done, all these data sets will be merged into a single data set. The job is successfully done, and if you go to the data flow and look at this, so total 830 records are merged into the target, and let us go and cross check how many records are present in the source. So the same count. So it's a cross-checking mechanism called as reconciliation. So you do a reconciliation on the count of the data. First stage, second stage, you pick a particular category, right, and look at the data count. So 249 records. So you can just cross-check here, go here and apply filter and see, right, same 249 seconds. So you did that on the data level as well, and you can apply a combination like ship wire is equal to 1 and employee ID is equal to 6. you can go and cross-check this data and this data, and you can say that, okay, all the records that I pulled in from my source are loaded into my target. Right, so this is how we use case and merge transformation. So any questions on this? Please let me know on case and merge transformation. Case is used to split single data set into multiple data set based on the condition, and merge is used to combine multiple data sets into a single data set. So any question on this?
Rakesh.
Yeah.
Rakesh, can you show me only once again? How did you bring these three tables, like source table? I think you took from the other source, right?
Yeah. So if you look at this, in the case, I created these three target tables, right? Orders via one. So I saved them in my target data store. So ds underscore target is my data store. So I went to those data store, and as I created them as a template tables, they will be present in the template tables list. I have them via 1, via 2, and via 3. They are present here. So I created a next data flow, which is df underscore merge. I selected them 3 via 1, via 2, and I dragged and dropped them.
That means we can use the template table as a source again.
Yeah, we can reuse those tables, because if you look at the general project flow, so first you need to take the project through different phases, right? So first one will be your extraction, where you do the scoping. Then next one will be your validation, and third one will be your enrichment. So the extracted copy, so let us say I want to pull the data for fiscal year 2015, right? So this is my scope data, and this goes, and here in this extraction phase, this is my target table, and this target table will become a source for my validation, right? Right, so this will become my source, and on this source the validation is done, and I will have two tables, valid and invalid. Right, so invalid will go to the data owners to take a sign off, and then this valid will become the source for enrichment, and based on this valid records they will apply the business rules and get the final enriched data. So the template table that we create in one data flow, or the first data flow, you can use it as a source table, or by default it will become the source table in your subsequent data flows if you drag and drop them. If you are using those template tables, by default they will become your source tables in the subsequent data flows.
Okay.
Okay. Is that clear, Jaffer, or you want me to give more examples on that?
No, I got it.
All right. So the major difference here is, the template tables and the permanent tables. So let us say I'll go and utilize one table here, stage materials. Now this is my template table, right? I created in another data flow. So once you run the job, the table will be created here. And if I drag and drop it into another data flow, so by default it will be your source table. Now, how do I convert a template table into a permanent table? So to do that, you need to select a template table, right click, and import that. So any template table, you need to select that one, right click and import that. That table gets converted to a permanent table. So I'll show it here. So we are done with the case and merge, right? So I can show it here. So select the table and right click and import, and now this is converted to a dark blue color table, and this is displayed under the permanent table list. So you can also import from here. You can select a table, right click and say import table, and that will be converted to permanent table. So one first difference that you will notice is once a table is converted to a permanent table, it will not be present in this list anymore. So stage orders, I just converted the target table here, so you will not see that under the template table list, point number one. And point number two, if you look at a template table, target template table, go to the options tab here. So you have a nature of the
Rakesh, what is the
table.
difference between template and table?
Yeah, I'm coming to that one, Jaffer. So the nature of the template table is it will be dropped and recreated. So whenever you run a job, and if your job has some template tables, let it be your source or let it be your target. So template table, the nature of that one is it will be dropped and recreated. Which means if there are any structural changes in my source, like first I executed the job with 10 columns. Now again I'm running the job with another 13 columns in my source, so it should not be a problem, because anyways it is getting dropped, which means the entire table structure in the database is getting collapsed and recreated. So every time I run, whatever the structure in the source will be created, and even the data will be, since the table is getting dropped, so the structure of the table and the data will be collapsed on the database, so nothing will be there. And again, when you rerun this, it creates a new structure based on the source, and the data also, the fresh data set is added to this table, right? So it will pick the structure from this source table and what are the structure it is there. So next job, I remove this table and I use another table with additional columns and apply the condition and run that. So whatever the table that I pull in here, the second table, these template tables will pick the structure like this of that, the second permanent table that I used as my source. But if you look at the permanent table, right, it's already there. Go to the options, and in the options you don't see drop and recreate table as the one that we see for the template tables. So on a template table, you have this option called drop and recreate the table, right? But you don't have that option on your permanent table. So permanent table is something like a table with a commit statement on the database. Right, so you create a syntax like create table, table name, like select star from employee. So let us say if I have a table called employee, which has columns as employee number, name, salary, and designation, and I want to create another table. So I go and create it using a statement, create table, then table name, mp_new, like select star from. I'm using a like statement here to create this table, like this table, and also I'm using a select star statement. So whatever the data that I have in this table will be created in this table, right? And next I will go and use a commit statement, which means I am committing these changes to my database. So now it is a permanent table, and if there are any changes in the source structure, right? So this is a permanent table. So if I go and do any column level change here, that will throw an error, because permanent table will not be dropped and recreated. So any changes in the source metadata will not be entertained here. So you will not make a table as a permanent table unless and until you are sure that there will be no further changes in the source structure. Point number one. Point number two, whenever you run a job, so make sure that these metadata are same as this one, and now you rerun the job, the data gets appended to this table. So it is not dropping and recreating even the data. So you run one time, all the 830 records get inserted, Now you run the job for the second time. What will happen? Another 830 records will be inserted. And if there is any primary key column, so it will throw a warning saying that cannot insert duplicates. So if I remove this, the more number of times I run, every time the data gets appended. So that is the reason why we have delete data before loading. So let us say I created a permanent table with some test data, and now I want to delete that test data and load the actual data into that one. So I can go with this option, delete data before loading, run it, and then uncheck this one and run with my actual data. So these are the two different tables we have, permanent and template table. I think we spoke about it, but just to clarify on that, these are the two differences. A template table, a permanent table, if you drag and drop that into your data flow, it will ask you whether you want to make it as your source or as target. So based on your requirement, you can make it as source and you can make it as target. But on a project front, unless and until you get a confirmation from the functional consultants or data owners, you will not make a table as a permanent table. By default, we keep them as template unless and until we want to use them for lookup purpose. So especially when we are working on the lookup purpose, lookups can be done only on the permanent tables, not the template tables. The reason is it is understood that if you have a permanent table, the table structure remains same, and also the data is a standard data.
Yeah, Rakesh, I have one more question. When we receive the technical specification or the functional specification, it's clearly state that which type of platform transfer we can use. I mean, there is any guide, like for example, if we are bringing data from 3 different sources tables and we are bringing to one target table. So in the functional document, they also mention that we can use merge or case statement, something like that. So do they have some guide like something, or we have to decide ourselves?
No, they will not have a guide, Zafar. For sure, in the functional document, they will not specify which transformation we need to use. So reading the functional documentation, we'll be creating another documentation, which is technical design document or technical specification. So in that, we need to specify what transformation that we'll be using here. So let us say I'm pulling in 3 tables and I'm trying to combine them and merge them and load them into or like I have to move the data from 3 tables to 1 target table, and now I have to concentrate what is my business requirement. Is that 3 tables need to be joined and loaded into the target data, or they just need to be merged into a single data set and loaded into the target data. So if in case it is a join, like we need to get the relevant information from 3 tables, now I will be joining these 3 tables using a query transformation here, and I say order via one order ID dot table 1 is equal to order ID dot table 2 is equal to order ID dot table 3. So that will be my joining condition. I'll pull the common data, so I can use a left outer join, right outer join based on my business requirement. I'll go and use or propose a query transformation here. If the requirement is to merge all these 3 data sets into a single data set, I'll use a merge transformation. So we need to decide on which transformation we'll be using in that case.
Oh, okay. So, but they are only they are only one table. For example, if the source table we have like a department and employee, right, and we want to merge those so that we can use the joining for the source.
Yeah, we can join 2 tables. Let us say this is the employee and this is department. I can use query transformation and I can join these 2 using primary and foreign key relationship and load it into my target. So in that cases, we'll go with my query transformation. Not
so functional consultant or the technical consultant never gives you any like hint or something in the document when you are doing the transformation. You cannot get anything.
You can just get an indirect indication from them saying that this is how my data is and this is how it should go into the target. So based on what they say, we can go and propose the transmission. So that is the reason why I was saying we should know in and out of these platform transmissions, no excuses or no exceptions in that, because if we know how to use them in and out, so we ourselves can go and define like, okay, hey, your business requirement is this. Now you have to use the transformation query, not merge here, because query can suffice your requirement, not a merge transformation. So we will tell them, right? If we know in and out like how this.
Oh,
Now if somebody asks you, I have a data set, I want to split that into 3 buckets, and I have a condition for each bucket, then you can easily go and say like you can go and use a case transformation and it can be
right.
achieved easily, because we know that. And now somebody comes and tells us like, I have a business requirement, I have data from 4 different quarters, I want to give promotion code 1 for quarter 1, promotion code 2 for quarter 2, 3 for quarter 3, and 4 for quarter 4. You want to give different promotion codes. Now how can I do that? I have the entire data set in single table. How can I apply that? Do I need to write different conditions on that? No, because if they go and write a different condition, like condition 1 where data is equal to quarter 1, so again you have to do a cross check. Now you can use a case transformation to split that and apply the business rules, and again use a merge transformation to combine them, right? So as we know about these transformations, their nature and how they proceed, we can suggest them, right? This is what they need to use, right? There will not be any specific, but if you look at
I
the
know, I
functional
got it, I got it.
document.
For example, when we do the web development, sometimes when you are creating ELB reports, they give you like, okay, you can use the selection screen before showing the data, right? So user can start working on it, and we can use the variants. So something like that, sometime in the technical specification mentioned. So
Yeah, technical specification generally, on a project level these days, when it is a technical specification, the best practice that was followed across is like the developer will write the technical specification just to make sure that this guy understands in and out of this functional specification. So he'll attend the workshops with the functional consultant.
yep.
Till he gets a complete knowledge on that, he will not kickstart the object development. So he'll go and write and get it reviewed. So his seniors, leads, and architects will review the technical design document, and in that technical design document, he will say like, this is my understanding from this line, and in this line it says that this data should go into different buckets. So these are the tables, this is the transform, this is my target table. So he will mention it on a technical side on the TDD. Technical.
So we can discuss with these functional guys and the business owners, right?
Exactly. So they have to give us a very clear picture like what they are expecting, and then we will create a document, and we will give our view saying that, okay, this is how I foresee how I can achieve your output using my POD's job, and we will give it to a reviewer. Like he can be your senior consultant or a lead consultant on this project. So those guys will cross-check the functional design and your technical design document, and if it is good, he will say, hey, you can go ahead and start the development. If there are any corrections, he'll say, buddy, you cannot use a merge transformation here, you have to use a query, and this is what the functional design document says, and this is the right understanding. If you still have any questions, you go ahead and sort it out with your functional guy and correct this and send it back to me for a review. So this is why you'll go again, request for one more meeting, sort out those questions. He will update the document, and he will come back to me, and I will read it and I will approve it. So once I approve, this document will be converted into a signed PDF document, and on that PDF,
and you can start it.
Yeah. So that is the general process that is followed.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, right. So the next transformation that we'll be looking at is query transformation. The definition here is very small, but you can do wonders using query transformation. And even if you look at the best practices of SAP or go and pick any random project in this world, you will see this query transformation being used 95% of the times, right? If you compare this usage with the other transformations, you will see definitely query transformation used 95% of the times when compared to the other projects. So it's like widely used, and you can do anything using a query transformation. It's not just limited to structured tables. You can also handle unstructured data using query transformation. So we will cover each and every part of this. Most of them theoretically I'll go and show, like, okay, this is what we do, this is what we do, and we also have good examples in the future, so I will build them, right? Creating a function call within a query transformation, creating a new output column and populating that with some other function, then creating how do you create an XML data in the query transformation. So as we proceed with our topics here as a part of the training, as we proceed with different transformations, we'll be using the query again and again. So I'll be demonstrating the complete details on the query transformation then, but as of now I'll show you each and every tab, what are the options, how they work, and on the working part we'll be using this query transformation, and definitely for sure without a query transformation, data services is incomplete. I can say that. Sorry, any questions? Sorry for my bad throat today, and it's troubling me a lot. So let's go ahead and look at the query transformation. I'm just creating a job underscore qt underscore demo, then a data flow underscore qt underscore demo. So if you look at this one, the right hand side tool palette, it has only one transformation present on that. If you clearly notice that this is the only one transformation that is present on the right hand side tool palette, and that is our query transformation. The reason for that one is this query transformation, even SAP or data services architects, they know that person who created this data services, they pretty well know that this transformation is the most used transformation, so they gave it that place. So they gave it a place on the right hand side tool palette, knowing that it will be the mostly used transformation. So I pick my orders table as my source, and then I use a query transformation, connect it, call this as qt underscore demo. Now open this. We already spoke about this, but I'll allow to repeat. So it's divided into three regions. One is your schema in, which talks about your source table structure, schema out, your target table structure, and the work area. So let us say if I pull in two tables as my source, orders and order details, right? Connect it with the query transformation. Now you see two tables here, orders and order details. Now you see two table structures. So schema in contains the number of, so what are the source tables that you have? The schema in contains their metadata, and the schema out will be containing the structure of your target table that you define within the query transformation. So query transformation, it allows us to, as we spoke, the column level filter. You can pick the specified columns that you need. There's no need for you to go for each and every column. So let us say my source has 160 columns, but my business don't need them anymore on the target system. They want only some specific columns that they mentioned in the mapping sheets. So you can select them and move them to the output, right? And This is a row level filter that we spoke about. And the second thing that we can do is also a change in the metadata. We already spoke about it. So you can change the metadata, right? You can change the data types. Even if you just click on this here, so it will take you through a drop down and you can change that one. You can change the name of the descriptions. You can change the descriptions here, right? So let us go and concentrate on box by box. So first let us talk about the schema in, then once it is done we can go to schema out and then go to the work area. So schema in, I can collapse and expand my source table structure, right? So if somebody asks you, can you go and change the metadata in schema in of a query transformation, the answer is no. We can do that changes only on the schema out but not in schema in. You cannot do any conversions on your input schema. So if you, there are two levels in which you can do a context menu or right click within the query transformation. One is at the schema level, the second one is at the column level. So if I select the schema, right click, so I can copy this entire schema just in case I want to, you know, copy all columns and put it in my schema out. I can copy it and I can paste it, right? So this is how you can go and create the nested structures, right? So this will be my parent structure and this will be my child structure. You can delete this one, right? So you can copy here at the schema level, or you can do a quick find. So how many columns has ID in them? So it will take you to all the columns that has a word ID in that, right? You can do a quick search. So naturally when your source tables are big, you have 200, 300 columns in them. So you cannot scroll down one by one and search for a particular column if that column is present. So what you can do, you can select, right click and click on find, and you can search for that column. So I want to know if a column with the word via is present, so it is present. Because if you look at the mapping sheets in a project, right, so the functional design documents that Zafar was talking about recently, just now. So these functional design documents will be attached with a mapping sheet, so which talks about your source to target mapping. So how your source table column is mapped to your target table column, and how it is getting transformed. So first thing, I need to first understand if these tables that are mentioned in my document are present or not. So what I will do for that, I'll go and select my source data store, right click and go and search, and I'll search with the external data, and I'll search for those table names and import them. If they are there, if they are not there, I'll go and ask my business or my data owner saying that you mentioned this table ABC is present in your mapping sheet, but it is not present in my source. Can you please cross check and let me know the correct table name? So they will go and do that. The second thing is, now once you import the table, you need to look at a particular table and the columns. So they will not be generally specifying a business rule on each and every column. So only some 10 columns from a table or 5 columns from a table based on the business need. So what we will do, we'll go to that table and second check, we will see if that particular column is present. Yes, this is present. And now the second check, so it's ID. Yeah, all the IDs are present. Now this date, right? So we have this 3 date columns present, right? So if there is anything called as time, so it will say no items found. So if you find something called as time in your mapping sheet, and if it is not present here, again raise it back to the data owner saying that you mentioned that this order details has a column called time, but I don't see it in the structure. So can you please validate your mapping sheet? So unless and until all these activities are done, right, you cannot start the development. So you need to freeze your functional design document, freeze your technical design, freeze your mapping sheet, which means the other way in which I call it as frozen document is you export that into a PDF. I mean, you sign the Word document and you expose that into a PDF, which means this cannot be changed further unless and until there is a change request on that one. So that that is an assurance for us to go ahead with the development. All right. So this is one quick search that will help you to uh, find the columns, and the next one is refresh. So sometimes there can be changes in the columns in the backend source table, so you can just refresh them. Now you can also go and collapse. So some of these are grayed out, so they will be active at the column level. So collapse the structures or expand the structures, you can collapse them. And if you are selecting anything, you can just map a schema to the output, so that will be moved to the output. And create a file format from here also. We created a structured flat file from schema out by selecting here and create a file format. So you can do the same from here as well. Your input structure, create a flat file format and Hadoop file system, and then you can also look at the properties. So these are the different options that we have at the schema level. Now let us look at the options that we have at the column level. Again, you can copy this and paste it, right? So you can copy one by one column and paste it in the schema out, or you can find again. So you can just type ID and it will take you to all the IDs. So you can do that at the column level as well. And you can, if you have like you're somewhere here at the bottom and you want to see from which parent or which table this column is coming from, you can just go and say parent, right click on that and say parent. It will show you from which source it's coming. You can collapse these tables, right? So you can map it to the output, you can add it to the output. So if you see here, if a column is repeated, so the system itself is giving it a special name, which is _1. So this is advantage of data services. So you repeat a column, it will be identified by _1, and if it is really required, you can rename that to let us say this is old and this is new. So here I can select that, press F2 and say new. So if required, I can maintain it like that. If not, you can easily identify that, hey, we have a new column and you better delete that because it should not be present in the target table unless and until you need it, right? And the next option that we have is properties of that particular cell. So these are the options that we have in schema out, right? So these are the options that we have at the schema level and at the column level. So majorly you have find, map to output, and you have refresh. So these are the major options that you have. Now let us go and look at the options that we have in schema out. So we have so many options here. So some of them are related to XML, some of them are related to the nested structure. So we will see them now, and we will just have a discussion about them right now. But as we proceed, when we deal with the XML data, we will definitely see how we can utilize them. So if you select the schema out, the main schema, and do a context menu, so you have options like cut, copy, and paste, right? You can copy this and again paste it back in some other schema or some other query transformation. So just to make sure that you copy this entire structure from here and you want to reuse it in some other query transformation, not only this one but also some other query transformation, you can do a copy and paste. Then you can also do a quick find if it is present in the target, right? The next one that you have here is make it current. We'll talk about this when we are dealing with the nested structures. Then you can create new output columns, right? So I can create a new output column and call it as row number, and I can keep the data type as integer. And here in the mapping tab, I can populate that with a function generate row number, which will create an index from that one. So if you look at this, all the mapped columns are the columns that I pull to the schema out are represented with a triangle, and unmapped columns are represented with a pipe symbol, and the moment I drag and drop it, it will get converted to a triangle. So there are some columns, or at least one column, that is represented with a double arrow here, which means this is not directly fed from the source, but it is fed with an additional function on that. So whatever the column on which you apply a business rule, right? You go and apply a business rule on a particular function. So this function will tell us that this particular column will be identified with a double arrow. So if you are applying a function, if you are applying a business rule, that particular column will be represented with a double arrow. So in the list of schema out columns, if you find any double arrows, you can tell them that, okay, this is having a business rule on that one. And the columns that are with a key symbol here represents a primary key column, right? So you can create a new output column. You can also create a new output structure. So if you are working with IDOC structures or nested schemas, so you can create a nested schema here. So just give it a name, and it will be nested under this one. We'll talk about the nested schemas more in detail when we deal with XML. So I'm not concentrating much on them right now. So new function call. So if you are trying to populate a new column with a function, or you create a new function call, right, and use a built-in function, right, custom functions, lookup functions, string functions. So you can use any of those built-in functions, and you can call that function as a new function call, and that will be created as a new output column, and it will populate some value into that particular cell. We have a new lookup ext, so now it is too early to talk about it, so that's the reason why I'm not talking about it. But yeah, we will see these examples once we understand the basics of query transformation. Now, propagate column from. So if you are trying to get some columns from the other table, so discard, you can propagate that one to schema out, and if you want some other column from here, postal code, you can just propagate and close. So they will be moved to the schema out. So you can propagate those columns, and next one is, these all are related to column level. These are related to the nested structure, and this will be activated at the column level. So you can generate a DTD schema, XML schema, file format, Hadoop file systems, and properties. Right, so these are the options that are available at the schema level. And next, at the column level, all right, so again you have cut, copy, and paste and delete. So you can delete any column that you don't need in the schema out, and you can also do a quick find. Then new output column. If from here, if you create a new output column, it will first ask you, do you want to insert it above this column or below this column? So you get to choose like the order in which you can create the columns here. All right, so new output column, again new output schema, new function call, and if a column is a primary key, it will be checked here, and if you want to uncheck this one or remove that from the primary key list, you can just uncheck this. The reasons why we need this is especially when we are merging data from different sets, right? So there is a possibility that you have the repeated order IDs, especially when you are merging the data from multiple tables. Now, if you have them as a primary key, then definitely it will throw an error saying that it will not entertain any duplicate entry in that column and your job will fail. But your business requirement is still to capture all those columns or all those values in this column, and you want to see how many times this particular order ID is repeated. So first thing is you need to remove that primary key property on that column. So you need to do what? You need to select that column in the query transformation schema out, right click, and you say you can make the primary key and you can remove the primary key property on a column, right? So that is what we have here. And next, you can make a column optional. So the system will really not bother if you get data into it or you don't get data into it. You can just make a particular column into optional. And then the last one is your properties. So on the schema out properties, you get a change option. You can go and change them. You can change the name, but not on the schema in. Schema in is your input, so you generally don't do any changes on your input. Some tricky questions, not those so important, but at times they might ask you to see how much you know about these transformations or how much you worked on them. So the more you practice, you by default have an answer for all these questions. But initially, right, when we start looking at the system, we might feel like, okay, I have to remember this, I have to remember that. But I tell you, don't keep remembering things, but if you start working on the system, practice, do each and every transformation 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, like till they get fixed in your mind, then there's no need for you to even look back at the system before you go for an interview. You can directly go and answer that. So my sincere advice will be practice a number of times before you go for a project or an interview, so that these things will get fixed in your mind, and if somebody asks, you can say, okay, this is how you can do this, right? If somebody asks, I want a new output column and I want some calculated column to be created, then we can say, in this case, you need to use a query transformation, and what is the calculation that they want to do? They want to apply a business rule, or they want to concatenate data from multiple columns and show it in one column. So for example, if you look at the customer information, he will have names like title, first name, last name, middle name, right? So you can concatenate all of these three together to make it is like Mr. Rakesh Samuel. So you can concatenate all these three into a single column, right? So you can, based on the business rule that this guy is expecting, you can tell him that, okay, this, you can use a function or you can use a concatenation pipe symbol to achieve this using a query transformation. Right, so these are the options that we have here. So if you look at the schema out, it talks about the name of the column, the data type, their mapping. So mapping tells us to which source column it is mapped to. So the moment I select any column here, so that will show me from which table, which column the data is getting fed into this one. So ship via old and ship via new are pointing to the same column. So if you see here in the work area, we also have something called as a mapping tab. So whatever the mapping that you have is here, right? So or to put it more precisely, whatever you do here will be displayed here. So for this new output column, I'm not taking anything from the source. I'm taking it from the row generation. Right, so it shows row generation here, and then it will show from which table this column is coming from. So this is my mapping, and if there is any description on a column level, right, IDs for authors, if you give any description, or sometimes your SAP tables will have these descriptions, so you can maintain them here. And again, if it has some particular context, so you can say like this is my context. So this, if it is a date, it has a predefined structure. So you can go and define the context, and you can also utilize a business name for that one. So these are the different options that you have here in the schema out. And next one is my work area. So if you look at the work area, it is divided into 8 tabs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So version 4.0 or 4.x, let me put it this way. From version 4.x, it is 8 tabs. In the version 3.x, it is 9 tabs. I'll show show you in this current version, they haven't removed something, so I'll show you a proof for that. Or if you get to connect to a 3.x system, go and look at that in the query transformation. You'll have 9 tabs in that one. So the interview question again, so they want to know like what is your expertise. So if you mention in your profile saying that I worked on 3.x and 4.x, so the first question that the interviewer will be tempted to ask is like, how many tabs are there in this version? So is there any change in the query transformation? So first they will ask you the architecture changes, like what is the key architecture change in 3.x to 4.x. You have the answer. You'll say central management console came into picture. Then the second thing they will ask, like what is designer level changes? What are the designer level changes? That you have an answer. You'll say text data processing came into picture, and XML map also is one more transformation that came into picture, which was not a part of our 3.x transformation. The next thing that they will go and ask smartly is like, is there any change in the query transformation? The answer is yes. So in the previous version, there used to be another tab next right after from is an outer join. So there used to be a tab called outer join here. Right, so this one is not in 4.x as it is merged with from transformation. So this is 3.x, but in 4.x from has both from and outer join. Right, so this is 4.x. Remember the key differences, so that will really help us when we go for an interview especially. Right, so sometimes people will not really go by technical questions, trust me. They just want to know like if you worked on the tool, that's it. They will go and say like if you work on a tool, that's good for them. So they will just check like if you mention in your resume I worked on 3.x, I worked on 4.x, they really want to test if you worked on it. Right, so they will, with one question they will just suddenly justify saying that okay, you haven't worked on that. So the key differences, at least the key differences we should be understanding before we attend such interviews, or before we put up saying that okay, I worked on both 3.x and 4.x. Functionality wise, tool wise, there are no much changes other than addition of few transformations and changes in the query transformation. Right, so first tab is my mapping tab in the work area. So this mapping tab talks about the column that I select in my schema out. It talks to which column it is mapped in my source. So for example, the column like this, if it is not coming in from the source, it will say what is the factor that is populating data into this one. So what is contributing data into this particular column? So it can be concatenation of two columns, right? So create a new function, new output column, and insert below concatenate. So I'm just giving varchar 1000. Now I can populate this by dragging in shipping address, pipe symbol. This is used for concatenation. Region, city, pipe symbol, region, pipe symbol, and postal code. Right, now you see a double arrow here because it is not getting straightly populated from the source. So if I select any other column, it will show you only one. But if I select this column, it shows the data coming in from all these columns, because this is a calculated column that I created on my target structure. So it's a concatenation of address, city, region, and postal code. Alright, so it is identified by a double arrow here. So the things that I can do in a mapping tab of a query transformation are, first thing, back to basics, I can do a comment, right? And second thing, I can do a mapping to source. Then the third thing is I can do hard code, decode, if then else, or map to a global variable, or what else I can do? I can do a comment, I can mark it to null, right? So in a query transformation, I can put a hashtag, and in the mapping tab, I can apply a comment here. So this is there, but now the end user says do not concatenate this as of now. You populate that with the null value. So I keep two single quotes, which is nothing but null. Right now the double arrow is gone because I hard coded that one. Or you can just type NULL. So if your target system doesn't accept NULL word, you can use two single quotes, or if it will accept this one, you can go and do this one. So or to be discussed, right? You can hard code these things, right? You can hard code that to a null value or a null word, or you can give a fixed value for this, right? Or you can say to be discussed, it can be populated a little later. So all these things are my hard codes, right? Second one is mapping. So I can map it with my source. I can select a column from my source, right, and drag and drop it on this column, and I will say remap column. So I can map it with my data type, or just can map it, or if you want to insert above that or below that, you can do that activity. So I can just say remap column. Now I select the all right, I think there's some power issue from the staff, and just let me check with them. Just give me a second. So some technical issue with the GoToMeeting. I just need to reconnect. So just give me a second. I'll be back in a minute. Right. If you can see my screen, please ping me on the chat so that we can proceed. Yep. Thanks. Oops. Wait. Yeah, thanks, Zafar and Baker. Right, so this is something that we pass on the SAP side. So if there is any null value, we can just forward a forward slash. And if it is not null, then get the data as it is coming from the source. So I can do these if then else statements and decode statements on the schema out. I think it's working fine, Zafar. So let's give it a try. Talk for another few minutes, and if it is getting too late for you, please let me know so that we can hold it and we can continue in tomorrow's session. We'll just talk about yeah, thanks, Zafar. So we'll just talk about a couple of tabs here. And definitely, yes, we cannot complete the entire thing today. So we'll just speak about the basic things, and we'll just talk about 2 or 3 tabs here. I'll stop it today and we'll continue tomorrow. Right. So these are the things that you can do. So first one is comment. Second one is hard code. So you can pass a default value, a fixed value, or a null, or you can pass 2 single quotes here, which represents a blank value to that particular column. Then next one is decode. You can apply an if then else statement or a decode statement on the data, and you can do a concatenation on the columns, right? Anything, right, as per your business requirement. So if they want some calculation to be done, right, he wants the data to be split into 4 quarters, right, based on the month. You can create a quarter this thing. So if the month is in 1, 2, 3, 4, so it is quarter 1. The Jan, Feb, March, April, it is quarter 1. Then May, June, July, August is quarter 2. So you can create any output columns and just write the logic here. So it can be anything. So it's not just what I'm telling here. It can be anything. So based on your understanding, you come up with a scenario. Then we will think about it, and then we can write a logic for that in this mapping area. So all the business rules, right? All the business rules will be applied in this mapping tab of a query transformation. But to keep that performance tuning in mind, or to make sure that we don't overdo everything in single query transformation or single data flow, we kind of split this job into different phases, like as per the AIO methodology, which we'll be talking about at the end of this course. So we will be splitting the job into different phases, right? The project methodologies. So in different phases, when I say, I'll be calling the first one as my scoping, the second one is deduplication, third one is preload validation, fourth one is enrichment, fifth one is post-load validation, and sixth one is loading phase. So I split my single job in different phases so that if something goes wrong, I can easily go and say like, hey, this is where it went wrong. So I can directly go to that particular segment of the job. So these are the best practices which we'll be talking about them once we learn the tool. But yeah, so at every phase, I can do only the validations in validation phase. I can do the scoping in the extraction phase. So based on your scenario, you can apply a business rule, or you can apply that scenario using a query transformation. Query transformation is quite flexible. You can do wonders here. You can create new output columns and populate them, or if you want to apply 10% promotion code on each and every product, so you want to give 10% discount, you can create a new output column and say the actual price and discounted price. So you can apply a business rule for that one, right? So you can concatenate, you can create new output columns and populate them, right? So you can also use the built-in functions. So if you click on functions, there are aggregate functions, right? So aggregate functions, when I say average of the sales, count distinct, maximum, minimum, and sum. So average will give me the average of this, what are the money in that one, or what are the number that in one. The count will give me the count of all the values in that particular column. Then count distinct will give me the count of distinct values in that particular column. So maximum, minimum, right? Sum of these all values. So these are the aggregate functions. So you also have a conversion functions, right? You want to convert them to, interval to character, or character to number, right? So long to varchar, you can do a conversion on the columns. Then you have cryptographic functions, right? Encrypt, decrypt. Then custom functions, database functions, right? Date functions, environment functions. So get environment, right? So it will tell me like which environment I'm working on. Is that in development, QA, or prod? So we have to define those values prior. So get the monitor file name. So what are the file name that is, in which this monitor values are being pushed. So if once you execute the job, you see three things called trace, monitor, and error. So these values are also pushed onto a particular column. So you can get those file names here. So is set environment to default. So you can also have lookup functions, math functions, right? So square root of something, truncate, round, random, power of, modulation, log, length, floor, ceiling, abs, right? So miscellaneous functions. So generate row number group by, host name, if then else statement, is group changed, right? So truncate table. So you can push some commands onto your table saying that you truncate that and reload the data, right? So wait for file. So if the file is not generated, you wait for till so and so time, and if it is not available in the shared location yet, then go and throw an error message saying that this file is not available. So you can set the system to sleep. So there are a number of built-in functions, right? So we just need to read about them. So to tell you honestly, I myself don't know most of these functions, but whenever it is required, I just go and read about them. So I know about file exist, and I know decode, I know DB owner, so it will pick like what is the owner name for this table name. I can talk about if then else, greatest, host name, right? Get file attributes. So I read about them as I needed them in the projects, and I utilize them. So we will see in the list of miscellaneous functions, or list of functions, what we have, and we will try to utilize them as per the project requirements. Then SAP functions. So if you pull in some SAP functions, they will be displayed here. So string functions like ltrim blanks, rtrim blanks, especially when you're getting the data from flat file. Then print statement, replace substring, replace substring, substring ext, rpad, ext. You want to pad the columns lpad and rpad. So you want to pad the value with external zeros. Then you can system functions. You can send email notifications using these two. You can execute the external files like Windows files using this, right? So validation functions. There are like a number of functions based on the requirement. You can go and use that. But once you start practicing on the tool, what are the general things that you use, like generate row number by? So you just need to type them, and you will get those functions. So I want system date, so I'll just type SYS, and I'll get all the words that start with SYS, so I can just go and utilize them. So conversion, today, to care, right? So I can just go and type 2 underscore and I can see all the conversion functions. I can get some functions like this. So you can just type them here as required and you can see if they are available. So you can utilize them. And you want to edit this window, whatever this mapping tab, you can click on this and go and edit the values here. All right. And if you do something here, right, you can just click on apply and that will be applied on this column. All right, schema remapping. So all the details and orders. So just remap schema. So we can do a remapping here. So order details and remap. So it will be remapped. So this is what we have in the mapping tab. We will stop it here. So from tomorrow, from next session, we will see what is select, from, where, group by, order by, advanced, and find. So probably we might spend the entire session on the query transformation because this is the most important transformation of the rest of them. And we need to know in and out because, you know, anything you want to do something using case, you can achieve that using query transformation. You want to use something using merge, you can achieve that using query transformation. So you just need to know how to use that. And also this is one place where you can pull in a number of functions that are supported by data services and you can utilize them in the project. So my recommendation, rather than you read on the documents, you practice them more live on the system. That will really help you to remember, because reading might confuse you, but I mean it depends on how good you accept that part. But yeah, if you feel that reading will help you a lot, please go and read a lot about these functions and everything. But you know, as we proceed in different examples, we'll be using most of these functions, or at least like 98% of the functions that are used in the projects. We'll be talking about them, the most used functions, right, in the training. But rest of them, I recommend you to go and read and try out them on the system and see how they work and what is the reaction of the system when you use a particular function, right? So we'll see like almost 98. So I'm just giving 98 because one or two I might skip. So the transformations or the functions that we used in the project, we'll see them almost the most used transformations. 98% we'll cover these functions in the training, but just in case one or two if I miss and you have a question on them, you can reach out to me. I'll just go and read about them and I'll try to explain them to you. So this is about the mapping tab where you can apply the business rules. All right, you can do the calculations or conversion on the data. The data transformation, right, the actual data transformation can happen here using this mapping tab. So any questions you want me to answer today, or if not, you can ask them tomorrow as well. Can you please, so we have a question from Sandeep. Can you please explain about the other tabs in the template or target tables like bulk loader options? Yeah, we'll talk about them, Sandeep. So we have different scenarios to talk about them. We'll talk about that. Any more questions, Zafar? Bhargav, any question?
Yes, Rakesh, how we do the syntax checks for this mapping?
So this is what we do. Everything is validate current. So if you just do a validate current, it will, once again, it will show you if there are any errors. So this is the only syntax check that we do. So for every syntax check, let it be a table structure or the entire job. So now it will throw an error because I haven't defined a target table. So it cannot be used as the target node. So it says query transformation is an intermediate object. It cannot be used as a target. So that is what it says here. Right? Qt demo cannot be used as a target node in the data flow. So you have to go and define a target node. But within a query transformation, if I go and do a validation, so I'll have validate current active. So I'll check the syntax of this one.
Okay.
Rakesh, how to extract a template table directly from the source?
You cannot. There is no template table concept in the source. So if you have, so let us say I have some tables like orders and order details. You need to go and search, right? Search the table name, and you need to import that, and by default any source table that you import into data services will be your permanent table. They cannot be a template table. Or if you want to dump this data into a template table and reuse it, you can do that. You dump the entire data of this permanent table into a template table and you want to reuse that as a source in the next data flow, so you can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Alright, so I'm sorry if I'm just extending the class time, but I just don't feel like stopping in the middle. But if you feel like you're getting late or I'm doing extra timing, so please let me know so that we can do a hard stop there, and we can proceed with those topics in the next class or next session. So hope all of you got your server access. So please start practicing on that, because the more you practice, you'll get into more doubts. That needs to be sorted out. So please practice more in your system. At least spend 1 hour per day on your system. So that should be enough ideally. If you just spend 1 hour listening to the recording and again 1 hour practicing on the system, that should be more than enough. As we complete the training, you will have all your questions sorted out. So please practice on your systems, and we will connect again tomorrow at the same time. It's 6 a.m. IST. We'll connect sharp at 6 a.m. so that we can complete this query transformation and go with the remaining transformations of platform. Right. Thank you guys. Have a good day and good night ahead. See you tomorrow in the next session.